Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. Back in 1963, there was a reading into the Congressional record, an excerpt of a book entitled The Naked Communist, and it was by Cleo Skouskin. Now, this record was a list of goals that communists had for the United States. If you remember, communism was not just Soviet Russia, but also an ideology that was at odds with what we hold true and believe as a nation here and as Christians. But before we get going too far, let's make sure that we know what communism is. We're on the same page there, so to speak, right? Communism is a result of the ideology of Marxism. Now, Marxism, according to dictionary definition, okay, is the political and economic theologies or theories of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and later developed by their followers to form the basis for the theory and the practice of communism. Now, Marxist approach views class struggle as the central driving force of historical change. So if they want to change history, they want to convince everybody that there's this struggle, that there is this oppressor that you have to, as an oppressee, be able to overcome and overthrow and be able to gain control and power. So in other words, a Marxist, and by extension, a communist, sees the world around them as a systemic struggle between these oppressors and oppressed. They also have no use for God because everything is government-centered, not God-centered. Here is what the Naked Communist says about how communism views religion. It says, on religion, it is clearly evident from the numerous communist writings that what they fear in religion is not that it makes religious people passive to the dominant class, but that it prevents them from becoming passive to the communist discipline. Deep spiritual convictions stand like a wall of resistance to challenge the teachings and practices of communism. Furthermore, the communist sees the dynamic ideology of Judeo-Christian teachings a force for peace, which cuts through the vitals of communism's campaign for worldwide revolution. As Anatoly Lunarcharsky, there we go, the former Russian commissar of education declared, he said this, he said, "We hate Christians and Christianity. Even the best of them must be considered our worst enemies. They preach love of one's neighbors and mercy, which is contrary to our principles. Christian love is an obstacle to the development of the revolution. Down with love our neighbor. What we want is hate. Only then can we conquer the universe." That's a direct quote. And also, it suggests for ministers, this book has some suggestions for ministers when it comes to communism. And number 6 on the list I thought was really interesting. It said, "Be alert to detect those who use social Christianity to cover up the fact that they are not Christians." And we're going to talk a little bit about that just a little bit later. So kind of put that away in your pocket there. So as you can see, this is an evil ideology and philosophy that is antithetical to the teachings of the Bible. And this has been proven down through history. I mean, President George W. Bush declared a memorial in 2007 to the more than 100 million victims of communism. Some of the worst regimes in world history, as far as when you start counting numbers of people that die under, at the hands of these leaders, are communist leaders. Safe to say that it has failed every time it has been tried over the history of the world. So, with this in mind, let's take a look at what was read into the congressional record back in 1963. Now, it consists basically of a list of things that were goals of the Communist Party back then. I found it very interesting to see if any of these goals were accomplished, and if so, which ones and how. So here it is: Congressional Record, Appendix, pages A34, A35, January 10th, 1963. Current communist goals. Extension of this was an extension of remarks of Han A.S. Herringlong Jr. of Florida in the House of Representatives on Tuesday, January 10th, 1963. So it reads this way. It says, Mr. Herringlong, Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Patricia Normannen, and DeLand, Florida, is an ardent and articulate opponent of communism. This is what he's saying. So it's being read into the record. And until recently published the DeLand Courier, which she dedicated to the purpose of alerting the public to the dangers of communism in America. At Mrs. Nordman's request, I included in the record, under unanimous consent, the following current communist goals, which she identifies as an excerpt from The Naked Communist. From this, so this is from The Naked Communist, okay? And that's Cleon Skousen. The current goals: number 1, U.S. acceptance of coherence as the only alternative to atomic war. Now, you're going to hear these first two talk about atomic war and stuff. You have to remember, this is 1963. So back then, this was a big deal. Atomic war was a big deal. The proliferation of the atomic bomb was just exploding, and a number of different countries were getting them. And obviously, the USSR, Soviet Russia, was one of them. We were one of them, obviously. And there's a lot of people that were really both on both sides, Russia and the U.S., because these were the two world powers that were concerned the other one was going to blow up, their enemy. So you're going to see a little bit about that here. But looking past that, the whole idea here is that they wanted to spread the idea that you had to capitulate to them, that the only way, the only alternative to this atomic war is to coexist with them, and thus develop an attitude that basically said, don't do anything to make them mad. and we see some of that even today. I mean, if you even when you look at the Middle East and the Israeli situation, the Israeli war right now with Hamas, many were saying, well, no, we can't allow Israel to go to war against the Palestinians because we might make them mad. We have to capitulate to them. And that goes into our second one here. Number 2, U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in an atomic war. So again, when they say atomic war, it is they're really talking about worldwide dominance, because if you're the only one that has an atomic bomb, I mean, other than us, because we're the one that invented it, but we have morals and we have Christian values and things, and we didn't dominate the world, become world, the leader of the whole world type thing. But that's their goal. And so in communism, and that's a stated goal. And so when they say atomic war, they're meaning worldwide dominance. But what do we see here? That to capitulate to the preference of engaging. Well, hey, I mean, look at Biden, the Biden administration, and their whole foreign policy. I mean, their whole foreign policy was based on just giving things up. Just going, hey, here you go, we're out. Type things. I mean, can anyone say Afghanistan? I mean, that's a classic example of the Biden administration's foreign policy. You just say, well, yep, we're out. See ya. You want to capitulate. You want to you want to go to mediation over anything else. There's no peace through strength type of thing. Yeah, I mean, you can go and you can go back way farther than the Biden administration. I mean, you could. Here's how. Does anybody remember the Obama flying over pallets of cash to Iran? I mean, this was capitulation. This was saying, "Oh, hey, we don't want to make you mad. Here's a bunch of money. Come be our friend." They're trying to buy friendship, right? Buy peace. That's what the Communist Party here is saying that they wanted to instill in the U.S., the willingness to do that kind of thing. I think it kind of worked, don't you? All right, number 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. Okay, let's talk about this one. I mean, the disarmament would be like showing moral strength, which of course is the opposite of peace through strength, right? I mean, peace through strength, Ronald Reagan in the 80s demonstrated just how valuable peace through strength diplomacy is. I mean, we don't have the USSR in part because we were very, very strong under Reagan, and the USSR imploded because of it. You can look at today. How about climate change policies? I mean, the whole thing of climate change, whether you believe in man-made climate change or not, the whole policy thing is set on, hey, if we do the right thing, then hey, we'll be great examples for everybody else in the world, and they'll want to do this too. China, for instance, China's commitments under the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is where a bunch of countries got together, including the U.S., and they said, hey, we're going to do all these different things to try to take CO2 out of the air, and that way we can affect climate change. Well, China's commitments under the Paris Agreement include peaking its carbon dioxide emissions before 2030. Okay, so they're increasing all the time their carbon output. China is. I mean, they're literally building coal plants at, like they're bringing on like, what is it, 2 a week or something like that right now, brand new ones. So they're increasing their carbon dioxide, and under the Paris Agreement, they're allowed to increase their emissions up to 2030. Now, is that the same for the U.S.? Because again, Obama brought us into this agreement, and then Trump took us out, and then Biden put us back in, and Trump took us out again. But where is the U.S. commitment? Well, they're committed to reducing CO2 by half by 2030. So China gets to increase all the way up to 2030. We, by 2030, have to decrease by half. That is capitulation. That is disarmament as showing moral strength. So, well, if you're the moral standard as you claim you are, then you should do way more than everybody else, right? So why is this the case? Because they say that we need to be that good example. Permit-free trade between all nations. This is number 4, okay, on the list. permit free trade between all nations, regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. Did you know right now the Trump administration is struggling with a decision? And that decision is to allow companies like NVIDIA and things like this to sell chips used for AI to communist countries like China. China has a stated purpose of wanting to wipe the United States off the map. Okay, they want to be the dominant force in the world controlling all humans. That's what they want. They've said so. They believe they can do that in part by using AI. And they are working on their own chips. They would like to use chips from NVIDIA and things that are better right now. And Trump is trying to say, well, maybe we should get them hooked on our chips and then they won't develop their own. Maybe we shouldn't sell them chips at all. This is what they're struggling with, and this is exactly what number 4 is trying to say. Communism wanted this free trade regardless of whether or not it hurt the United States or not. Well, in some cases, it will. Now, I'm for free trade in many cases. Okay, no doubt about that at all. But there are times when, for national security reasons, you just can't do it. And so, and you can't do it because it would take us down as a country. All right, number 5, extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. So when I say Soviet satellites, we're not talking about the things that go up in the air. The Soviet satellites at that time meant that they were the satellite countries. So Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, what they did was they wanted to have like buffer countries, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And these buffer countries were all around them physically. If you look on a map, these buffer countries were all around them. And they basically were a part of the USSR, but not officially, right? The governments were put into place by Russia, and they were run by Russia and all this kind of stuff. But they kept their name and, this type of thing. And they were there so that if there was ever an invasion of Russia, that the war would be fought on these countries' land rather than go into Russia. And so they called them Soviet satellite countries. So what they're asking here is to try to do everything they can to get an extension of long-term loans for themselves and for these satellite countries. Well, today we do even better than that. Yeah. How about grants instead of loans? We literally give money away. What's a grant? A grant is where you just simply hand somebody money. Right, a loan. I mean, you could go to your mom, let's say, and say, "Hey, Mom, I'm wanting to buy this car, but I don't have exactly all the cash. Would you give me a loan? Usually like 0 interest, right? And because you're family, or maybe you go to your brother, or whatever, and you say, "Hey, would love to get a little bit of money here so I can buy this thing, and I'll pay you back, over 2 years, whatever." That's a loan, right? Well, a grant would be your brother saying, "Hey, you know what? Here, here's $2,000, whatever. Just, you don't pay me back. It's yours. Go get that car." So those are grants, and that's what we do around the world. Oftentimes, we give out grants instead of loans, and that's some of what Doge has been looking into is, where is this money going? Where are these grants going? And how are we following up with those that we give the money to in order to make sure that what we're giving the money for is actually happening, right? And that's why Doge has found a lot of these places weren't doing that. Okay, a lot of the federal government was just giving out money to their friends and then going, "See ya." Be like your brother giving you the money, and then you're like, "Hey, let's go party," whatever. Not buying that car, and he never followed up on it. He never said, "Hey, can I see your new car? Let's go for a ride." That's what we do in many cases, and what we have been doing, I guess. And under Trump now have been curtailing, but that's basically what USAID was all about, and that's why the Trump administration shut down USAID, because much of the money, all the funds, Congress was giving USAID all this money to say, okay, go out and do good things. And then USAID was just giving away money to their friends, and particularly when it came to their liberal organizations and nonprofits, and again, wasn't following up, wasn't doing anything, just saying, here you go. And a lot of these went to countries around the world. Some of these countries were communist countries. In fact, let me give an example here. In fiscal year 2023, USAID committed $9.61 million to China. Okay, we gave $9.61 million to China. Why? Well, it's primarily for economic purposes. So we're helping their economy by giving them almost $10 million to communist China in the year 2023 alone. In 2021, $1.1 million was awarded to the Eco Health Alliance. Does that ring any bells? Right? It's a U.S.-based nonprofit. And then guess where that money went? It was funneled through Eco Health Alliance, and then those funds were directed to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for Research. That rings a bell because that's where COVID-19 started. How about Cuba? In fiscal year 2023, the U.S. committed $9.52 million in foreign aid to Cuba. Yeah, Cuba. They're a communist-run country just off of our coast. In 2022, the year before, USAID gave $2 million in just one grant alone to Cuba. How about Vietnam? In fiscal year 2023, USAID committed $111.9 million to Vietnam, funding areas such as health, higher education, environmental projects, and disability support. What are we doing? Why? Why are we spending almost $112 million in 2023 alone to build up a communist country? Laos, similar thing. USAID has committed grants to Laos for health, education, and economic development. In fiscal year 2023, USAID committed $32.6 million, 32.6 to Laos. So all of this ties in really well with number 6. Provide American aid to all nations, regardless of communist domination. Some of the money is gone through Red Cross. Now, Red Cross can do some good things. Red Cross has not done some good things, and they don't care what kind of country it is. That the American aid can go through places like USAID, Red Cross, some of these others, and some of this money is just simply grants, just giving them money, piles of money, for whatever reason they want. Number 7, grant recognition of Red China, admission of Red China to the UN. All right, we can check that box, right? China is a part of the UN, and not only are they a part of the UN now, they are on the Security Council of the UN. It's like a 5-member board of 5 countries, and they all have veto power. So if something comes through the UN and one of these countries doesn't like it, they can veto that. And China, communist China, is one of those countries. In 2022, the UN Human Rights Council, the UNHRC, voted down a Western-backed proposal to even hold a debate on China's human rights violations against the Uyghur Muslims. You remember this, right? We talked about this. There is a genocide. If you want to talk about genocide, there is a genocide happening within China among the Uyghur Muslims. And China won't even allow debate about this human rights issue. But hey, they're a part of the UN, which was a goal of the Communist Party. Number 8, set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the German question by free elections under supervision of the UN. So this is interesting because what they're proposing here is division, not unity. And we know that they didn't get this one because Germany is together now as one. There's not East or West Germany anymore. There's no wall. Ronald Reagan helped with tear down this wall, and it did. And so that did not come to fruition. Well, it did, but then it's no longer. Number 9. Prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the United States has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. So here's one. And again, this goes back to the degrading of American power and influence around the world. This is, again, this is what their stated goal is. They want to be the world superpower and no one else. They want to control the world population and no one else. And if they can degrade our ability to fight back against any kind of attack or that type of thing, well, then that is what that's what they want. That's a good thing for them as a communist country, right? Number 10, allow all Soviet satellite individual representation in the UN. Again, that's Soviet satellite countries. And most of these countries actually are now in the UN. With Russia crumbling and imploding from within, it did help with that. So number 11, promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. Some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. So, okay, this is an interesting one. Okay, in fact, the UN has tried to make itself like the one world government type of thing, and I was trying to think back to the accomplishments of the UN since the United Nations since it started. And so I actually had to look some things up, like, well, what has the UN accomplished at all? Time magazine actually listed the UN's top 5 achievements. So let's take a look at those and let's see if they are this wonderful thing that the communists want, right? Number 1, convincing Egypt to divert a highway that was near the pyramids. That's top 5 accomplishment, according to Time magazine for the UN. Number 2, eradicating smallpox through the World Health Organization. Okay, I mean, notable, but didn't take the UN to do it, I wouldn't imagine. In fact, they were using private company injectors and things. Anyway, number 3, protecting the ozone. That's their number 3 on the list of top achievements for the UN. Number 4, helping children through UNICEF. Again, I mean, this is not something that the UN that is needed to do. I mean, UNICEF does some good work, and they've done some terrible work actually when it comes to Palestinians and things like that. In some areas, they're basically run by Hamas. But anyway, neither here nor there. Let's just say they're doing some good work. Well, there's a lot of nonprofits that are doing the same thing. So is the UN needed for this? No, probably not. Number 5, promoting arms control. 1968 Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Well, again, you didn't need the UN for that, right? Countries get together all the time and make treaties. So those were the top 5. Don't think the UN is doing anything of any significance and hasn't since its inception. But that's another podcast, right? All right, number 12. Number 12 says, resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Actually, what was really interesting is, and I said this on the podcast not long ago, Oregon Communist Party actually disbanded. Why? Because of a lack of democratic process within the party. If that's not an oxymoron, that's really funny. Number 13, do away with all loyal oaths. Okay, so this is interesting. Loyal oaths, what's that mean? Well, it's like the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Have we seen anybody sitting for the Pledge of Allegiance lately? Colin Kaepernick, does that come to mind? NFL quarterback who basically lost his job, not only because he wasn't very good at being quarterback, but because he kept kneeling and doing stupid stuff like that during the national anthem. And even today, I mean, if you want to get even more local to our times now, there's a California teacher who's changing the Pledge of Allegiance in her classroom to the Pledge of Pride. So, yeah, let's end that one right here for now. Let's pick up from here tomorrow, and let's look at some more. I think you're going to find as interesting as this has been, some of this it's picking up steam, and so yeah, we're going to cover some ground tomorrow, and let's do that. I would love to hear what you think of these, and whether or not you think these goals have been achieved or are being achieved. And of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.